Hi, this is Jenny Shore from Metal Priestesses Podcast. Today on our show, we are pleased to welcome Jennifer Finch. Jennifer started her musical career as bassist in Sugar Baby Doll with Courtney Love and Kat Bjelland before joining one of our favorite LA punk bands, L7, in 1986. She also has an interest in photography, and her show 14-Inch Shooting was displayed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007. In solidarity with Jennifer, we taped this show barefoot. As always, take it away, Wendy.
It develops. We urge you to stay tuned to radio and TV and to stay indoors at all costs.
As of 12 noon tomorrow, say goodbye to the world as you know it. Say goodbye to
Metal Priestesses.
We want photos and music and art and the works.
Right. It's actually a Man Ray print I was just sent. I started collecting photography.
Jennifer, I wanted to ask you about that because you're a photographer. You started shooting when you were a teenager, correct?
Yes, 1 second.
Okay.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
just switched
perfect.
microphones.
That sounds good. Great.
So you collect photography and you were a photographer as a teenager and you had a show called 14-Inch Shooting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was younger, I was what's called an amateur photographer, meaning it's just the word that's used to describe someone who, I wasn't a commercial or retail photographer. I wasn't shooting for a magazine. I went out to just shoot for myself and kind of the art of photography. And then I kind of stopped. I mean, when it was like college age and time to go away to school, I kind of stopped and then picked it up again in the 90s after I joined L7. And now I'm currently a commercial photographer and shooting retail.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is there anyone that are you shooting musicians or what kind of photography do you do?
Thank you for asking. I develop more like specific art bodies of work. I can do portraiture, but I'm usually like the last series I did prior to COVID was called The Summer to Come, which was kind of about, it sounds so boring, but it's going into landscapes in like evacuated public places, which was kind of timely for COVID.
Yeah.
And I missed out on it, but and then basically what I do is I do these big prints on gelatin of these big public spaces and I put them on ice and let them melt.
Wow.
So I mean, it's not like, and it's very intricate and fun and I love doing it. And it's kind of about combining photography, visual languaging, and public space and just the nature of fading and loss, all kind of into one like multidisciplinary art expressions.
Do you think that you'll ever do like an album cover or something like that?
It's a public space, yeah.
The kind of thing, like I have always, I've been a digital nomad since the 90s and I've always, foreseen how the record industry locks artists into specific genreification, ways to market, marketable assets. And I've always been that person that's admired artists like David Bowie who break out of the norm of like, here's my song, here's my art,
Yep.
And yeah, I would love to co-create with music creators as well. I'm a music creator myself, so I love doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's kind of beyond maybe album cover stuff. But
yeah, maybe like an
assets.
Sorry, did you see that series that they did shot all over the former Soviet, the USSR, right? And so they had all these amazing like abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere. Did you see that series? And is that something that along the lines of what you're talking about?
So I love abandoned spaces. A lot of artists have been doing it. And I have seen a specific artist who I don't know the photographer's name, but went into sort of like northern Black Sea areas and did all of these resorts that were just going back to nature. I'm talking more about public spaces that we view as public spaces. So for instance, I called Versailles. I was living in Paris a couple years ago, and I called Versailles, and they allowed me to go onto the property after hours at sunset in winter. And I did just landscape, fisheye landscape, long exposure photography.
Oh my God,
it's
it's my dream to go there.
Like
I would love to go there. Oh my God.
It's incredible because it was always a public space. It was always a media marketing piece when it was built, for other countries to know the wealth of France.
It's ridiculous.
It's interesting to go in there and just photograph that.
Maybe we can do a podcast from there. Yeah.
I hope so.
Sure.
Aspirations,
Sure.
Jennifer, I was laughing because I was just the other night watching the first Decline, and I decided to watch it with the commentary, which Dave Grohl did. And like the very first thing he says is, "Oh, there's my ex-girlfriend, Jennifer Finch," during the Germs.
Well, he wishes.
But yeah, stupid men. But
I'm just teasing. That was very nice of him to do that. Yeah. I haven't seen him do it. I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen the movie since it premiered in Hollywood at a theater.
I wanted to ask you about being there, like seeing the Germs, and did you know that they were going to be filming, and how that kind of happened?
Yeah, they were very good about having us. Everyone signed a waiver. They made sure everything was posted. That the show was being filmed for a feature film.
Yeah.
So yeah, not that exciting. I think the band knew, people in the audience knew, and I think that their reaction was in a sense that they, we're from LA, so we know what being filmed and documentation is. Like we grew up with that bolted into us, like, how to market our experiences.
Right. Yeah. I'm also an Angelino, and I know you are too, Jennifer. What did you start playing music? Were you inspired by the LA punk scene, or how did you get started?
Yeah, my story is pretty typical and probably very similar to yours. Like, we were young, and there was a lot more sort of freedom to go out and explore art and punk and music. It wasn't like, I don't know if I'd send a 14-year-old now to a show by themselves, but or maybe I would. I don't know. That's my impression. Maybe I don't want to underestimate any 14-year-olds, and certainly having that experience at that age was incredible. And it just started with going to kind of local shows and larger venues. The first show I saw were the Ramones at Ackerman Ballroom at UCLA, and my second show was the Cramps at the Whiskey. And I took a camera along. That's mostly amazing. Because I didn't want to get kicked out for being underage.
Now, I had a weird experience where my mom died when I was 17, and I was already playing guitar, but I lived in the Valley, and there was like no support for playing an electric guitar in the 70s. And my dad got remarried, and I remember I had the outfit that I wore to the wedding, I wore to go meet the Ramones in 1976 or 7. I don't know which. Their first show in LA. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to bloody wear that outfit to a show and go backstage. How about that? And so I have a picture. I can't show it to you, but it's Joey Ramone tried to chat me up, but I'm like, have my eye on Dee Dee.
Nice.
So I eventually did meet
publishing.
What's that?
Keep your eye on that publishing.
Yeah. No, actually Jenny Lenz took that photo, but it was in the Ramones exhibit in New York City in Queens.
How
and
fun.
I asked Linda Ramone, does anyone want that photograph? Can I have it? And she mailed it to me.
Aww.
So it was so super cool. But yeah, I just remember being incredibly rebellious and thinking, yeah, I'm wearing this bloody outfit to the show. How about that?
Sure. And that's the glory of being young, right?
Yeah.
You're basically a sociopath that doesn't care about anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good way to put it.
Freeing.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it was one night at the Starwood where I met the original members of Backstage Pass and we formed a band. But yeah, it's just like back then it was like just like scores, like just sort of, we're like kind of meeting each other and like kind of forming bands on the spot. It was the Germs and the Go-Go's and a lot of different bands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jennifer, who was like your all-time favorite punk band? Like you had to go see them every time they came through, or maybe they were, Cali natives.
I mean, that's a really good question because probably the allure was more about the scene and the people more so than the music. But I am, admittedly, as much as we just had those conversations about the Ramones, I mean, I started going to shows in the 80s. So I'm part of that influx of hardcore movement that made going to shows dangerous and super hyper masculinized and like all of that stuff. And, so Black Flag and the Circle Jerks are more of sort of generational of bands that I would see over and over and over. But in that, I recently had somebody go through my diaries and list out all the shows that I would mention in my diaries. And surprisingly, there were some really great people that I saw. Like, I don't know if you know Johanna Wendt. She's a performance artist. I've probably seen her more than a lot of the punk bands, like just in really enjoying her performance. And I know her as a friend now, 40 years later, 50 years, I don't even know how many years later. And yeah, interesting stuff like that. I mean, it was pretty diverse. Like I would see Fear, but then I would see Geza X, or I'd see bands that you might consider more like experimental and arty and different and coming out of that 70s punk scene and still going through the 80s.
Did you go to the Lhasa Club?
Went to the Lhasa for sure.
Yeah, they had some good shows there, and they were, like you said, they were more diverse, and there was like sort of art combined with film and all that. We played there a few times back in the day, and it was a great place.
Was the promoter Janet Cunningham?
Yeah,
Do you remember?
I think so.
She was also the person that did all of the background for getting punk rockers into films too. She ran like an extras agency. And she ran clubs.
Right. Yeah. I think I remember Pleasant Gaiman talking about that because a lot of the punks were like extras to kind of like earn money, But the Lhasa Club, was that where like they had shows like Exene did like readings and things like that? Like
Lhasa was more of a experimental art space. So they had gallery shows there and readings and it was through the 80s, and they did an after hours version of it also.
Right. Yeah, those were great.
Yeah, right now my kid is doing something similar. It's called Junior High LA, and they had to close during COVID, but are reopening, and they do those kinds of installations and things like that. And
yeah, what was the location?
It was on Hollywood Boulevard, and they had to close down because of COVID, but they're reopening. I think it's in Eagle Rock, but I'm not sure. But
awesome.
they give voice to a lot of, people who I guess I would describe it as people that feel marginalized in some way or another, or just need a kind of safe space to gather.
Sure.
And I think that's the way a lot of us started. I mean, was just the one thing about the punk scene is that we all felt like we fit in some way, and when there were no shows, we were just like sitting on the side of the street, I think, just hanging out with one another,
Of course, it's a bond, it's the glue.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah. Jennifer, do you have any photos that you've taken through the years that are like so sacred to you? You'll never really show them to anybody? Any like private moments? I mean, not dirty. I'm not trying to get dirty. I mean,
yeah, sure, Elizabeth.
Whatever. No, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was an amateur, part of what I did was, I took these photographs essentially for myself. So there are a lot that are sacred, but I'm finding as I move through time, I'm able to give people who, these memories are shared. That's the point.
Yeah.
And, it allows me to be able to continue to give back to that community. Like,
Yeah.
the thing about like getting older is that most people become more interested in the photographs if someone passes, right? And there's like a life celebration. But, I'm kind of the one that from our scene of the Cafe de Grande and like that stuff that they come to and say like, oh, do you have any pictures? We just lost someone named Taz, who was in a band called the Atoms, who played quite a bit. And, I got to pull out all these photos of us just like sitting on the curb on Sunset, just hanging out, laughing, eating, and it's such a great reminder of like times that were, what a life well lived.
And are you going to do a photography book? I mean, are you going to, sort of a memoir using photography?
Yeah,
something
not
like
really. I mean, I'm not that interested in it. I think that kind of stuff is a lot of hard work for very little return. I'm not that interested in legacy
Makes
media.
sense,
I might do something like a fanzine. I want to do fanzine releases, separate, like interviews with the photographs. And I think that would be more honoring the photographs in themselves of like, that they're not this sacred book that's like printed in Europe and like has to be press checked and like this whole thing. Like, I'm just not.
I'm really excited because I just saw these never before photos from when I was like 19 years old. And they were all for Slash magazine. And so it's like there's a book coming out, but I think a lot of the stuff that we're doing then, we never expected it to really last. It wasn't meant to last. It was like, just very.
Oh, but that's the nature of everything.
Yeah, it is.
That's the nature. So Eva Warchick is doing the book, right? Because she got Bruce's licensing. He was the photographer at Slash and owner and editor of Slash magazine. And I assisted him. He was one of my first mentors.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
this photographer that took the photos is Melanie Neeson.
Okay, I don't know Melanie.
Yeah,
but
Melanie. It was issue 1 with Vanian on the cover and has a fabulous crotch shot of me in front of the screamers that I'm totally embarrassed about, but I'm sure they'll be showing it, Yeah,
I love those shots because, like back then, embarrassing. Don't let anyone see. Like I used to strip in Los Angeles. I used to work at Paris House, which is actually still open for no apparent reason.
Wow.
And part of it was that they had a magazine that was associated with it. And if you worked there, you had to pose. And there was something about back then, which I love because it's so specific, is that line between performance and the photograph, because the photograph goes to the magazine and it lives out. And I remember I would thought, well, maybe if I look cranky in the photos, they wouldn't publish them. But of course they published these like full nude, vag out like shots. And I was so embarrassed for years. And then like in the last 10 years, I'm like, oh my God, where are those shots? They were so cute. Why didn't I save a copy? I have this like old magazine, it was like it's like newspaper. So it's yellow and deteriorating now. And I'm like, oh
my God, that's amazing.
And that's the nature. That's the brain, right? The brain judges. It judges us. We judge the stuff we put out as artists or just photographs or like whatever. And then 10 years later, we look back and we're like, why did I hate that photo or that music, that piece of music, that painting I did? It was great.
Does it also work the other way for you? Do you sometimes look back at things and go, oh, why did I do that? Or I could have done that better? Or are you pretty sanguine about it?
That's a really good question. I am completely kind of relieved of the feeling of nostalgia. So I kind of have a piece of my brain missing because I know a lot of like the stuff for the past and the punk and all this stuff. And like, I don't know that feeling. It's like a mixture of like the stickiness of desire, right? But it doesn't come to me like that really. So I don't usually look back on stuff because I know that I need to keep producing it. As an artist, I'm going to be producing on my deathbed all the way to the, boneyard. So that judgment just can't be a part of it.
Well, it's interesting. I can I can really relate, because as being a trans woman, there's a part of my life that for many years, because I transitioned 20 years ago, but I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see that. And then, like you just said, in the past few years, I've also want to release all the old music and do that, but that involves photographs. Music never bothered me that much, but looking at the old, or listening to the old music. But so I totally get what you're saying, and yet at the same time, I do have that little nostalgia chip implanted in my brain, so it's kind of exciting to go through that stuff, but with mixed emotions.
You are you. In every part of your experience is your experience, no matter what body or presentation you are in, no matter what, it is part of your experience, and it's important.
Yeah. And I think you can eventually get to that point, once you've worked through everything else, and we all go through that. So that's not, exclusive to being trans.
Sure.
I know. And it's funny that you say that, Jennifer, because, you've been a part of so many amazing scenes, and you've been there when they've begun. So it's funny to hear you say that you're not really nostalgic, because we all want you to be. We're all those jerks.
I haven't even really done interviews up until last year, because up until, COVID hit, and I really had to start thinking about, presentation and how I'm going to talk about this stuff, because sometimes it's presentation and explaining, isn't necessarily part of who I am. I'm kind of go, and I use my self to express. I use music to talk about myself. And it's just been the last year I've been like, also, I'm going through an academic process right now. I have never graduated college, so I'm in the process of just getting an undergrad right now. So that has been instrumental, because they'll just put you in front of a class and say, defend this. And I'm just like, I can't be shy. And
I would die if you were in my class.
I remember, I couldn't focus or go to college when I graduated high school because of, losing my mother and everything. So I didn't go back to school until I was like 30, but I looked 18. And I remember sitting next to somebody, and I said, "Oh, I'm 34 or something." And the guy just like fell off his chair, and then the professors were like, "Did you write this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And so it's a weird thing going back to school later, but it is also, sometimes I didn't even know how to write, but then somehow it got unlocked, and then it just all came out. But it's an interesting thing going back to school later in life, like when you.
I think you appreciate it more.
Yeah,
like you're more dedicated, and you want to be there.
True, yeah.
It's.
I went back after 23 years to get my master's degree in psychology, and it was really interesting, because most of the people were recent graduates, but not all of them, and I ended up actually teaching at that school later. So human sexuality, I'll have you know, I taught
nice.
I taught graduate students human sexuality. Now, see, the world is changing.
Do you think, Jennifer, that L7 will perform again once the world is so called round again?
We currently have shows.
Oh, great!
Yeah, we have a date at the Kenza Festival in Spain. Wow. We're booked at Riot Fest in Chicago in the fall. So we'll see how that goes.
I'll be there.
We're just taking it like
I'm in
we'll
Chicago.
be there if they have us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We released Scatter the Rats, which is a new release on Black Heart Records.
Great album.
This is Joan Jett's label, and COVID hit. Okay. Most artists have the same story, but it'd be nice to get out and promote the record a little bit more and kind of look at. It's been 30 years since our Sub Pop release. Sub Pop was a label from the Northwest, and we released a record in 1990 that's kind of considered like like a very classic of that era hard rock, but definitely the proto nod to what became grunge and on Sub Pop. And that record just experienced its 30th anniversary. And Bricks Are Heavy, which is Pretend We're Dead, will have
Yep.
a 30th anniversary next year.
Such great
I
albums.
got a phone call from my kid, and my kid said, "Someone stole your punk name, Mom." And it was like, because my punk name was Jenny Body, and I think somebody from Sub Pop is named that. Yeah,
I don't know.
Jenny
Yeah.
Body. I think that a Hole had a song called Jenny's Body or something
Jennifer's
like
Body.
that. Jennifer's Body.
I hope that
And
wasn't
so
about
I
you,
looked
Jennifer.
it up. No.
Courtney says Courtney wrote it at my house when we were together when she wrote it.
Well, then maybe it
Oh.
was. I
But
love
there
that
is
song.
someone called, there is called someone Jen. There's a Jenny Body with the J, but I'm with the G. So, but it was definitely someone that worked for Sub Pop.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, you know what's just ruined society are all those like RuPaul drag race queens that have come out stealing all the punk rock names like Sharon.
Right?
Sharon Needles?
Yeah, there's a Sharon Needles won the drag race, and Sharon Needles was a guitarist in LA who was in Betty Blowtorch and a couple other great bands.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I stole her name. But
yeah,
I want to see an L7 Lunatics tour.
Would that be fun? You know, the Lunatics the book is coming out.
I know.
In a couple weeks. June. I feel like it's a couple weeks. I already bought my copy. And it's with Jean Fury, who's an amazing writer.
Oh my God.
And they're supposed to be playing punk rock bowling, which is exactly where they should be.
Oh, but yeah, no, I need you two to tour both bands together.
We'll see.
Let me put that together for you.
It would make good sense.
Would you mind, I know nostalgia is not your bag, but would you mind talking a little bit about the early stuff you did with Courtney Love and
Sugar Baby Doll?
Sugar Baby Doll.
Yeah.
Will you ever release the demo?
So that's something that I hold that's sacred to me.
Okay.
That the girls have used the songs, so it's not that nobody has heard the songs, but that particular version is, I think, pretty sacred. And it's really going to be a matter of if everyone can come to that's what I've always said. If everyone can come to the table to talk about it, then maybe we can consider releasing it. So we'll see what happens. But the songs are out there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just the three of us, Kat Bjelland, who went on to be in Babes in Toyland, Courtney Love, who went on to be in Hole, and myself. Another girl named Suzanne Ramsey, and then we hired a drummer named Greg, who was in a band called the Sea Hags. And there's versions of it that are floating around on cassette tape, so it's not unheard.
Right. It's just, us super fans, we all want it. I don't want to pay $3,000 on eBay.
Yeah, we have a list of demands.
Right, we do.
Well, that's kind of one of the things. I mean, that's like one of the things that I want to make sure that it's not held in any kind of container like that. I believe that music should be out there and sold.
You were known to be like super energetic on stage and often barefoot. What do you
I still am right now.
I am too.
Me too.
I just unplugged myself.
You could plug back in.
I'm taking my socks off now just so I can be cool too.
Okay, everyone take your shoes off.
Mine are off.
I'm barefoot. I always am.
Did the quality of my sound just change? I just switched mics again.
You sound good.
No, it sounds really good, actually. Can you sing us a few bars? You heard it here, exclusive on Metal Priestesses.
Yikes.
Oh, yeah, everyone had to have their shoes off. Yeah, in tribute to Jennifer.
Yeah, we should have done that beforehand. I do apologize for doing that on our interview.
And then you messed it up, Jesse. Jennifer, what's it?
What gave you the I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What? Are you still in touch with Courtney and Kat? I know Kat's been ill, but we are wishing the best. We're all big fans.
She's ill. I mean, I think that's known. It was a
Yeah.
secret for a very long time.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's like an encouraging thing right now for people to, you know, express themselves publicly, like what she meant to them, you know?
Yeah. That's such a great talent. Amazing. Yeah. And are you and Courtney on good terms, or? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in England right now. She lives in the UK right now.
I saw that on her Instagram. And,
yeah, she talk about a life well lived. Talk about just visioning for yourself, like this idea of a vision and just going for it. She's an inspiration for that.
I was reading, and she sent you records many years ago, when she was working at a record store in Portland. And I thought to myself, when the hell did she ever have time to work at a record store in Portland? I mean, like, she has been everywhere. She lived in England when she was younger. She lived in Seattle. She lived in California. She did a bunch of movies. It's just insane.
Yeah. It's interesting how, and she's always lived very modestly, like through all those times. Like, she shared apartments and, you know, didn't have a car. Like, she was so hyper focused on what she was doing. I mean, she really is truly an inspiration.
Yeah.
In that sense, other than like clearly there's some, you know, misunderstood personality or emotional issues happening, or trauma issues, right? Like,
I mean,
I
but
don't know
like,
if you would agree or not, but you know, there definitely seemed to be something going on with her. But you know, she had jobs. Like, we all had jobs.
She did.
You know, everyone in L7 had jobs. We have jobs now. Like, we do other stuff. So it's,
what kind of jobs did you
reality.
guys have when you started?
Susie used to work dispatch at a cab company. Danita worked at the LA Weekly doing production and production design. I was a maid and stripped. What did Dee do back then? Dee was like kind of a I don't know what you call it, like a controller or like an accountant for a clothing company called Nana in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So it's not that, you know, like you tell people that, and it really breaks down a couple walls. And I never know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No, I think it humanizes you, you know? It's like,
people don't always want to see humans in their rock stars.
I know, but it's, well, especially I think with punk and, you know, the grunge movement, those were always rock stars, I guess, that were a lot more down to earth. You could really relate a lot more to.
Working as a controller at Nana.
Well, no, they're not glamorous jobs.
I used to work at department stores, but then every time a band would come into town that I liked, I would just quit and then get another job.
You had that luxury.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, it was constant seasonal work for me.
Right, but I mean, that kind of speaks to an idea of like a generation where we were able to kind of move in and out of the workforce based on our interests. You know, there were always jobs that we could do and come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit.
I mean, I never really, you know, of course there's COVID, but I mean, I don't know if I was 18 and trying to pursue being in a band in Los Angeles, I'm not, I guess, working a bar.
Right.
But you have to be 21. I don't know, restaurant.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Friends clothing line, doing social media. I don't know.
I mean, I guess there's a lot of people that do social media for others.
Was style something that you guys thought about, you know, because you had great style. It was just so pure and just seemed like you just looked cool, but you didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that there was, you know, a part of that style came from, you know, vintage and used, and the idea of maybe moving a little bit away from, you know, feminine gender presentation, but not completely moving into something that would be masculine presentation. So it was hard to find something outside of the norm, but we were very athletic and we were sleeping in vans and like things sometimes like the choice was just like how well it washed on the road.
Yeah.
As boring as that sounds. And then we
No,
never were the kind
sure.
of band that really thought like, oh, we're doing a photo shoot, we should like maybe go pick some new stuff out. You know, we didn't really have stylists come and interpret who we were.
You know,
So would you be doing a clothing line? Or?
Yeah, we wanted the street clothes look.
Did you do your own clothing line or anything like that? No.
I wish I did business development back then.
Talk to Jenny. Talk to Jenny about that.
Jenny,
would you ever
help me.
No, would you ever do like a business class for people on the music industry, especially for women? I mean, you're so like in there.
I don't feel well versed enough the way that the industry would work at the moment.
Yeah.
I could talk about maybe the emotional aspects, how to show up no matter what, how to do your research, how to self-identify, how to find out who you are, and where your audience is, and maybe connect directly. But I never was an industry person. Right. I couldn't have even told you how to do the industry in 1993. Kind of a mystery. So
how did the band get involved with Rock for Choice?
That really came out of Danita and I went to a pro-choice march in Century City, and the ladies that joined us there were amazing, but they were definitely like second wave feminists, and not including women of color. I mean, it's hard to talk about because I understand that they were doing the best they could with what they had. Sure. And they definitely weren't including trans women. I mean, it was like hard, like really hard. And so we wanted to do something different. So we went to kind of like we went to the feminist majority and just said, we want to start doing some actions. And that fundraising was what we did back then. If it would have, like, the stuff that went on was more about, how to find your voice, how to start stuff in your own communities, how to activate, how to be active was kind of the underlying, and we didn't get a lot of support with that stuff. So eventually we stopped working with them. And Rock for Choice was great, but it was what it was.
Right.
Yeah, it went on for quite some time though, right? It went on for like at least a decade.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine that it's still an issue all these years later, right?
Isn't it weird?
It's just
crazy.
Yes, I guess things go in cycles, but it's so depressing when you see that, all the bills and all the attempts to stack the Supreme Court and all that. It must just be, for someone who was involved as much as you were, it must just be kind of almost traumatic to watch all this still unfolding.
Thank you for recognizing my trauma. But I really just think that we're in America, and we just need to do the best that we can to create systems, like breaking down the systems that don't embrace the diversity. And that's just like, if it's just going to be, like sometimes I like to say, and it's like a shocking thing to say, but maybe it's not the hill that I'm going to die on, but it's definitely the hill that my heart is going to break on. But there's so many hills, and it just has to be an entire movement, and I don't, come on, Supreme Court. It's just
right?
like, whatever.
Well, I mean, Jesse, you were so close to leaving, like you were talking about moving because so worried about,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting. I mean, my wife Sonia and I, both of us are trans. We had to leave the country twice because she's Italian, and she couldn't get a visa or citizenship here. And then the marriage laws changed, and we came back. But the oppression in this country, it's not like it's perfect other places, but it's certainly a lot better, say in most of the European countries, not all of them. But, so much has changed, and yet there's so many things that don't change, and it you know, it is a struggle. You're constantly dealing with different aspects of non, you know, inclusion.
Yeah. The only, you know, I truly believe, like when I look back in history, history is on the side of, I'll use the word social justice. History is on the side of it. The winners are on the side of social justice. So we know that there will be change. That's 100%. There will be change. I think that the thing is just how to keep an open heart and compassion for people that are so fearful of change that it comes out in all these different ways. And then, you know, I personally trace it back to like the Second World War, where people were just so traumatized. All they want was 100% conformity and normalcy. That's all they wanted. And, you know, we've been slowly just moving away from it since then. And, you know, America's built by a bunch of people who left Europe because it wasn't conservative enough for them. And that's what our government's founded on. And hopefully all the other people that have come here, forced or otherwise, you know, will hopefully find voice in the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, as a child of the 90s, I really owe a lot to L7, the Lunatics, Hull, Bikini Kill, because you guys really educated me on all the different issues and what was going on. And, you know, I read every interview you guys did. And I mean, just hearing what was going on, and that got me involved. And so I really appreciate that about you guys. I worry that this generation might not have something like that because it's so hard to find, you know, women rock bands, which is why I started my blog. So people have a place to go and they can, you know, learn about what's out there that the media really doesn't cover. But it all goes back to, you know, your music and, you know, the other bands that were around at that time. I mean, I'm just very thankful that I was able to soak all of that in like a sponge.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you're saying, but you know, it's you know, rock isn't really a genre anymore, you know, like as we know it.
I know.
But there's so much, I have so much hope because there are so many ways of communication and information between TikTok and YouTube and creators, like people that are creating out there. And, you know, the quick identification of, I'm going to say, how can I say this? Like people that aren't necessarily playing fairly, whether they're aware of it or not, like how their behavior is enforcing their privilege and how that it can get called out very quickly. And currently, like David Dobrik's situation right now, like as we speak, I don't know how current you want to get, but you know, they are being called out and kind of asked to comment on that.
I can remember. I can remember when my kid, like sort of the early YouTube VidCon generation, and a lot of those bands and a lot of the I have to say, like well, they weren't all guys, but for being abusive to their fans or being predators.
Well, not shockingly, why would I ever be shocked? A lot of women who, you know, were 14 to 16 in like the late 2010s and part of the kind of Warp Tour, like the coming up of like the VidCon scene, are starting to gain their voices right now and coming out, and it's interesting to watch, you know, like Belle Delphine. Do you know who Belle Delphine is? A cosplayer gal, super cute, just started to come out and say, look, I dated guys. I was 14 and men in their 20s dated me. And that was in 2010. So don't think it's changed. And I heard her and she said that.
It just won't.
My kid was also 13 13 during that time frame, 2010, 2011 kind of thing. And there were, like I said, a lot of there were men and women in that scene that were predators, you know, that were, had some kind of very quick celebrity status, you know, from VidCon and that scene. And, and
Jennifer,
a lot of them are no longer on YouTube because of it.
Did you see a lot of that when you were touring heavily?
No, because
Yeah.
I mean,
you were with
maybe
cool
a
bands.
little bit with some of the older school rock bands, you know, you kind of, but people were consenting to play those roles. That's the best way I can describe it. I might not agreed with it, but they were consenting to play it.
Sure.
And, you know, I'm just not that person that's ever been granted unlimited power. So I can't say what I would do if I was granted like access.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how I would behave.
Right.
I experienced some predator things in the mid 70s, you know, and also uncomfortable situations like at the hands of people like Kim Fowley, you know. I mean, I experienced that, and like a lot of, I remember being like, he said that I was bisexual in front of like this whole group of people at a Rhino in store, and I was 18 or 19, I don't know, and horrified and embarrassed and shamed, and it was, and people were laughing, and so I mean that's what he wanted. He wanted to be funny at my expense, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, thankfully that we have a different, we know a little bit different now, and that hopefully more witnesses would see something like that going down now. But you know, the other part of it is, you know, I can't speak to him. I don't know him, and I'm sorry for your circumstances, but I'll say men like him were taught that it was this hunt and that it was a manipulation. And I think that, and they had access and privilege, and that, you know, the objectification of women. You know, a man just shot 8 women, right?
Yes.
In Atlanta. And I just saw a police officer speaking about it, you know, who was, and it was unacceptable. The way he spoke about it.
He had a bad day.
He had a bad day.
He said he had a bad day.
Yeah. But luckily, as I'm just like, what? There's other voices talking about that too. It did, like, I'm not feeling alone.
Right.
And like, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong in that presentation of what that guy just said.
Absolutely. I mean,
I have a
like,
question
even us
for you.
just talking about it right now, and like, you know, we have that foundation of that knowledge now to be able to identify it and talk about it and hopefully correct it.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
to change the subject a little bit, I read about you talking about pay for play. Now, I was on the scene playing and doing gigs when all of that first started, and it took a once vibrant, wonderful scene in LA and turned it into, you know, a product factory of sorts.
Sure.
But I know you're not a fan of it.
Well, I mean, I'm not a fan of it. You know, I think we all play our roles and we all take our risks. That's kind of part of it at that level, at the club level. You know, and especially if you're in a band and you're also acting as the promoter, then you also should be given a little bit more than just, you should be a promoter. Like you are the promoter when you're doing that. You're investing your money into it. And, you know, that model's still around. As book publishers have it now, and there's music kind of like that, but there's no reason to have that middleman in it if that's how it's going down.
Jennifer, I have to ask you something, because we share a band member in she's in the Reform Backstage Pass, Gwen Kahn.
Uh-huh.
And you were in the Pandoras, which is it's a band that I really liked. Can you tell us a little bit about the time that you were in the Pandoras?
Oh, thank you for asking. It was very fun. I was friends with Gwen, and I want to make it this thing about I was in the Pandoras, but I was really there to support them so that they lost a member and they had shows booked. And I can't remember if I recorded like a demo with them or not, but it was just really to support them and so that they could meet their obligations and hang out with Rick Elric and, all the stuff that when you're a Pandora, you get to do some fun stuff. So,
Kathy Valentine did that for me and Pleasant. When we had the Screaming Sirens, and she filled in, and we were doing someone had, I guess it was Fur Dixon quit, and she filled in, and we opened up for Nick Lowe at the Palace or something like that. And I think we also played Cathay DeGrand. You were talking about Cathay DeGrand. And I just remember my friend taking photographs of the cockroaches on the floor of Cathay DeGrand.
I was just going to say, you're right, exactly. I used to, when I would leave there, I would open my guitar case before I would leave after a gig and make sure there were no cockroaches in there. Because you get home, a few days later, you suddenly have cockroaches. Like, they should have called it the cockroach DeGrand.
Disgusting.
It was still fun. Nevertheless.
It was a great place, yeah.
Jennifer, we could talk to you all day, but I will end this interview asking one of my favorite questions. What is your favorite Spinal Tap moment that you've ever had?
My entire career has been a Spinal Tap moment. So
you can't dust for vomit.
It's true. There really are so many. So I couldn't even necessarily go into it. But I really do.
Come on.
Having the outside, the wife or husband, with their heart is really in the right place, and they come in and they kind of all of a sudden start talking about like astrology as a way to formulate a business plan. It's something like that. Not in L7, but in the Shocker and Other Star People. My two other bands. I don't know if you know. If the team knows about those two bands. Yeah, I would definitely have had moments like that. Other Star People worked with Roy Thomas Baker. I don't know necessarily if you know who Roy Thomas Baker is. He did Journey and producer of Journey and Queen, We Will Rock You. And tons of great stuff. So it was so fun to be at that level.
Oh, I bet.
But it was a lot of Spinal Tap moments.
I wish we were
there.
What
was your last, I want to ask one more question. What was your last show that you went to before this whole COVID nonsense? Not nonsense, but when the whole COVID thing hit. Mine was, I went to see Wild Honey, and it was the Loving Spoonful tribute at the Alts Theater. It was really fun.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say something really super fantastic, but what I did, I went to the Redwood, and the bartenders, I had dinner, and the bartenders were just doing their bartender fun bands. That was actually the last show I saw, but I was at Punk Rock Bowling right before that. So that was a festival and fun. And
I've never been to Punk Rock Bowling.
It looks amazing.
So fun.
It just looks amazing.
Well, you
Vegas
played right
party.
after it,
We did a bowling gig, but not Punk Rock Bowling.
No, but they were doing it that night.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
I know it doesn't happen.
It's not the same thing.
Sorry. Jen, this is called promotion. It's promotion.
It's a big festival in Las Vegas, but they take the little nightclubs and they do a lot of different shows, so you can kind of, definitely feel what it's like to go to be in a club, and it's sweaty. It's seen great bands. One of the last shows was L7 played with Cheap Trick and sort of the Nirvana get-together band in January.
Wow.
I love Cheap Trick. Yeah.
They blew us all away. It's one of those moments. I mean, really, I guess I could say Cheap Trick was the last band I saw right before the lockdown. I hate to admit it, though, they were so good. I just felt like, I could just watch them all night, and I wish I didn't have to play.
It's kind of amazing when you see bands that have been around so long, and they really do blow everyone away. And I saw Guns N' Roses a couple years ago when they reunited at first, and I was expecting the worst, and they blew us away. It's like, wow. But so it really says something with experience.
I remember seeing The Who at the Hollywood Bowl in like 2000 or something like that. And I was screaming. I just like seeing Pete Townsend and everything. I was like going nuts. I thought it was incredible. I think it was right after the, I can't remember, but I think it was 2000 around that time. And I was just,
okay, so who's the first band
great.
you're going to go see once lockdown ends?
L7.
Yeah, that's us.
A really good question, because I kind of been following like who has committed to touring, and there hasn't really been anyone. There hasn't been anyone yet. I mean, I kind of want to go see Corey Taylor because it's like I don't know. It's always a good show to go see him, but I'll have to look stuff up. That's such a good question. I wasn't prepared for that.
We like to keep our guests on their toes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally on their toes in this case.
I have tickets for the Picasso exhibit that's coming up, the big interactive, and they haven't announced the location, so I'm really excited for that.
I saw it in Chicago.
Pink Floyd. You did. How is it? Worth it?
I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's awesome.
Okay. There's the Pink Floyd interactive thing that's coming up too, which I think would be fun.
Oh,
I don't know anything about it.
I went to the Picasso Museum in the 80s with the Bangles. That's as good as I can share. And Prince was there. He jumped out of a limo for 5 minutes, and then we left. The end.
Why not?
Okay, we could go on all night. We're keeping poor Jennifer.
Yes. I'd love to see the David Bowie. I wish I could have seen that David Bowie exhibit in New York. I wish I would have went to that.
I saw the Stones one.
That's a regret.
The Stones was great.
Yeah, I think
they're my least favorite band.
The Pink Floyd one would be great, especially the Syd Barrett years. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. I love the Syd Barrett years.
He was one of a kind.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you so much.
We're just going to go on.
Wait,
My 15-year-old self and my 38-year-old self now are just ecstatic. So thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Stay in touch, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.